All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I see quite a number of members are joining. We are just about to start our session. I'm just going to give it about a minute for more people to join through, and then we can start officially. Kindly bear with us. Thank you. All right, I think we can get started. Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. All our members from Uganda Law Society that are online, I see quite a number have joined. Our non-lawyer viewers and listeners, I see also quite a number as well, and members of the general public. My name is Jamina Apio. I am a partner at Ivory Advocates, formerly ABM Advocates, and I am going to be your moderator for this webinar today. Now, today I'm very excited because this webinar is about celebrating the World Book and Copyright Day, which is under the theme, the significance of book publishing industry in economic development. If you don't know, in 1995, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, which I think most of you know as UNESCO, chose the 23rd day of April as the World Book and Copyright Day, which is basically meant to pay tribute to books and authors of books around the world. So I think that's a very amazing day. That was yesterday, but of course, because it was a Sunday, we could not have our webinar on a Sunday when everyone was relaxing from the Eid celebration. So that's why we're having it today on the 24th instead. But nonetheless, it's still an amazing day. Now, interestingly, this particular day, April 23rd, was chosen because it's a day that several of renowned authors around the world passed away. Authors like William Shakespeare. I know many of you know the books that William Shakespeare has written. Romeo and Juliet, which is very famous. I've read it myself. We have Hamlet. We have Julius Caesar as well. There's also a writer called Miguel de Cervantes, who wrote Dawn Quixote, which is it's an interesting book because it brought about the use of the word quixotic, which is now being used in the English dictionary. And it means the impractical pursuit of idealistic goals. It's also a word that I have recently gotten to learn. I hope I'll be able to use it in my grammar soon. And then we also have Ainca Garcilaso de la Vega. That was a very, very famous Spanish writer. And he was basically known for writing about the history of Indians in South America. So I think it's quite impressive that UNESCO chose 23rd of April, because that's the day that these famous writers actually passed away. Now, in a very recent study, it was determined that the book production plays a very significant role in creating wealth for nations. So I think it's very important that today's theme, being the significance of book publishing industry and economic development, is what's going to be discussed in our webinar today. So the Uganda Law Society, with the support of URO, Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization, have joined hands and organized this webinar to commemorate that World Book and Copyright Day. So at this point, I think I would like to introduce and invite Mr. Charles Batambuze, who really supported us to get this rolling in a few days. And I don't know if admin could ask, or at least allow him to just say a few words and greet the audience. Admin, back to you just to support us with this issue. Is Mr. Batambuze online? If he could join us and just greet the audience and say a few things about today. And we can get some support from the ULS admin so that his mic can be opened and he can say something.
Thank you very much. My mic has been open. My name is Charles Batambuze. I'm the Executive Director of the Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization. I'll be saying a few things about URO. But to start from the point that Uganda's book industry has come from a very long way, from a time when it was dominated by foreign multinationals, the time when we have a bit of independence in terms of production of books for use in schools, but also out of school. And that's a good thing. It's a revolution that actually started happening around 1998. In a special way, I would like to thank the Uganda Law Society for accepting to host us on this important day, the World Book and Copyright Day.
Mr. Batambuze, are you still there?
Oh yes, I didn't realize that I'd been switched off. Yeah,
okay,
let me start on.
No problem, the floor is yours, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I was thanking the Uganda Law Society for accepting to host this event. And I'd say that the Uganda's book industry has come a long way from a time when the books that were available in Uganda were from missions, you know, the Church Missionary Society, and also for the White Fathers of the Catholics, to a point where the publishing scene was dominated by foreigners, mainly British multinationals. And I'd said that since 1998, we've had some kind of revolution where we now have local publishers dominating the publishing scene, especially for school books, but also books for the general public. I had thanked the Uganda Law Society and specifically Dr. Kakoza for accepting to host this, and all the panelists who I contacted personally, those that I contacted for accepting to be part of this discussion. The Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization is a collecting society that is set up by authors and publishers of literary works to protect their works, to collect royalties and distribute. We're so happy to be celebrating the World Book and Copyright Day. We believe in the fact that authors and publishers should earn from their sweat, and we believe that discussions such as this will open the doors for these people to be able to earn from their works. We recently had our annual general meeting, where one of the things that was said that is the role of authors and publishers to create and protect. And as far as protection of copyright is concerned, the Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization plays a very instrumental role. We want to continue adding value to the publishing industry and ensuring that as many books as possible can be written, published, and that the writers and publishers of those books are able to earn some money from those works. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity. I wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Batumbuze. I think those were really amazing and kind words. And thank you for giving us a very brief history of how far the book industry has come since 1998. At this juncture, please allow me to introduce our very distinguished panelists, who are all from all different walks of life, and they have very extensive experience in the book and copyright industry. So first up, I would like to introduce Ms. Pauline Polly Achola. She is the Program Officer Communication at the Uganda National Commission for UNESCO. It's most known as UNATCOM, which is under the Ministry of Education and Sports. At UNATCOM, she's responsible for building and maintaining relationships between various stakeholders, both in the public and private sectors. And before this position, she was the Chief Administrative Officer at Kole District Local Government. Mr. Chola, if you're there, if you could put on your mic and your camera, please just say a quick hello to our listeners and our audience that are on. You're most welcome. Hello, Mr. Chola, are you online? If you could put on your mic and just say hello to our listeners.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Jemima. I had a little challenge changing my gadget from what I was doing or what I was using to now this current one, which is able to at least share my video with the rest of the participants. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much, Mr. Chola. Secondly, I would like to introduce Mr. Adonia Katungisa. Mr. Adonia is currently the director at the National Library of Uganda. And for all of you who love books, you should be knowing that Uganda National Library of Uganda is a very important place to go and find all the things that you may need to look for. He's a very skilled trainer with over 20 years in library and information science. And he is a lecturer at Chambogo University under the Library and Science Department. Mr. Katungisa, if you are on, please put on your mic. You're most welcome. Please greet our audience and just say a few words to them before we get into the question session.
Thank you so much, for that brief introduction. I'm Adonia Kapunsa, the Director National of Uganda, and I join the rest of the world in celebrating the World Book Copyright Day, under which we are organizing the role and the importance that books play in as far as transforming our society is concerned. Maybe a bit of introduction for those who may not be knowing. The National Library of Uganda is a government of Uganda body that is mandated to ensure that our documented heritage is collected, preserved, and disseminated to our fellow Ugandans. And in so doing, that's where now it is important that as we celebrate the World Book and Copyright Day, we really treasure the role that the book plays. And in exercising our mandate in this webinar, I'll be talking about the role of standardizing our publications, particularly the book, as far as the publishing sector is concerned, through the assignment of an international standard book number. And then I'll also talk about the legal deposits. That is one of the ways through which our documented heritage is collected. I thank you so much, and I'm very grateful at least for inviting me at least to talk to Ugandans about these two important aspects that are very important and relevant in as far as publishing is concerned. Back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I also thank you so much for giving that brief history and introduction about standardizing our ISBN. I don't know if any of you have bought hard copy books. You know, when you buy a book and you open the first page and there's always that ISBN and then a very, very long number. And for very many years, I didn't actually understand what it meant. So I'm privileged to have someone who has a lot more knowledge about ISBNs and will be helping us understand more about standardizing them in this panel session. So for our next panelist that I'll be introducing is Mr. Emmanuel Kawesi. Mr. Emmanuel is a distinguished alumni of Harvard University. When you hear Harvard, you know you're about to hear some really amazing things. He has a Master's of Laws and he's currently working as a legal officer at the Uganda Law Reform Commission. Previously, he worked as a technical assistant to the Deputy Inspector of Government and was also a senior legal associate at the law firm of Anguria and Company Advocates. Mr. Kawesi, you are most welcome to this panel session, and I would ask you again, like the rest, please greet the audience by just putting on your video and your microphone and say a few words before you can get to the questions.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I said, my name is Emmanuel Kawesi, and I'm a legal officer at the Uganda Law Reform Commission. I also join the issue in thanking you for organizing this, and also to celebrate together with the authors, the World Book and Copyright Day, the significance of the book publishing industry in economic development. Briefly, as stated, the Law Reform Commission is a government body established under Article 248 of the Constitution, and the mandate of the Commission is to keep under constant review and update the laws of Uganda. And that is done through engagements and consultations of all key stakeholders, and to work together with many other government agencies, including but not limited to the Ministry of Justice, the Parliament of Uganda, and other agencies which may need to have their laws updated. And I'm here to discuss the
Sorry, Mr. Kawesi, are you still there? I think you may have, your mic may have gone off just before.
Oh,
You can conclude, yes.
yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you and we can see you
Yes,
as well.
Yes, I was saying that as a commission, our mandate is to study and review the laws of Uganda. And we are a constitutional body established for that purpose. We work under the Ministry of Justice, closely with the First Parliamentary Council, and also the Parliament of Uganda and the other legal entities. And our main focus is to ensure that the laws at all times reflect the modern developments across the globe and also the aspirations and customs of Uganda. So I'm very glad to be here, and I shall be discussing the protection of copyright for authors in the light of the ongoing proposals to reform the Copyright and Applying Rights Act in Uganda.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kawesi. It's indeed your input in this discussion is going to be very important, especially looking at the different types of reforms that are coming up in copyright law in Uganda. And I think we will need to hear a little bit more extensively what we can expect as both lawyers and non-lawyers, writers, authors basically, and publishers in having our copyright protected. And last but not least, and it's my immense pleasure to introduce to you the next panelist, Dr. Anthony C.K. Kakoza. I should say he's a little bit of my boss, as he's the head or leader of our intellectual property cluster at the Uganda Law Society. And I report to him directly when such webinars and sessions need to happen, and he supports a lot. But other than that, he is currently a partner and the head of the intellectual property unit at the law firm of Biencha Chihika and Company Advocates. He's also a law scholar at Makerere University and a visiting professor in the United States, Czech Republic, Rwanda, and China. And he's also an advisor to the World Intellectual Property Organization. I think Dr. Kakoza actually holds quite a number of positions, and in the past years supported in quite a number of intellectual property developments, including in the copyright and book industry. Doctor, you are most welcome to this session. If you could put on your mic and your video and just say a few words to our audience that's listening.
Very much, Jemina, for the humbling introduction. I'm very excited to be here, to be discussing, sharing, and celebrating the World Book and Copyright Day. As of course you know, the last week of April is always full of activities for intellectual property enthusiasts. And if we look back about 400 years or so, when the intellectual property realm was beginning to be appreciated, it really all started with the book industry, with the Gutenberg Bible and all that. So it's interesting that we're going back into that same kind of discussion, and I'm happy to see where this webinar takes us in that direction. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mr. Kawesi, Mr. Katungisa, and Mr. Chola. You're all most welcome. And to our audience, our listeners out there from wherever you are, we are going to have a very exciting session. As you can see, we have a very provocative and attractive list of panelists, and they're going to share their views. As just to remind you, our theme for this session is the significance of the book publishing industry in economic development. I am going to ask that we reserve our questions until the end of the questions that are, until the end of the session by the panelists, and then we'll open up to the public. So without further ado, please allow me to officially welcome you, all and open this webinar. I am going to jump into the questions in just a few, so just bear with us. All right. So I am going to start the questions. And as I mentioned, we're going to reserve our list of questions from the general public to the end. But please have them at hand. Don't forget them so that we're able to touch on whatever issues that you may have. I would like to start with our first panelist, Mr. Chola. If you're ready, I'm just going to throw in this question. Now, Uganda has been a member of the UNESCO since 1963, and part of its mandate is to build a culture of peace, to eradicate poverty and ensure sustainable development. And it strives, and Uganda generally strives to meet this mandate with the support of the Uganda National Commission for UNESCO, which, as I had mentioned earlier, is best known as UNATCOM. Now, as you know, book writers play a very big role when it comes to sciences, culture, communication, and information. They also very important role for UNESCO when it comes to storytelling, setting the narrative of a nation, and basically knowledge sharing. Now, as part of UNATCOM, what role does the Uganda National Commission for UNESCO play in enabling book writers in Uganda to feel and enjoy the value of their work? And maybe let me just elaborate a little bit. When you talk about feeling and enjoying the value of your work, look at it from both the moral and economic perspective. From a prestigious point as an author, what has made them actually write that book, and how can we help them feel that their book has touched community and the countries that they are coming from? So, Mr. Chola, if you're ready, I hope my question was clear enough. If you do need me to repeat or just highlight a little bit more, please do let me know.
Yes, thank you, Jemima. My network is a little bit low, but I'm already here on board. Thank you for the question. As you rightly put it, Uganda became a member of the national. Uganda became a member of UNESCO in 1963. And let me also bring to the attention of all the members, all the participants, that this year UNATCOM is celebrating its 60 years of existence. We are established here at the Ministry of Education and Sports, and I would like to invite all of you to be part of this celebration. We are celebrating our work with Uganda. As you're all aware, we are linked between UNESCO and Uganda. We bring in all the UN recommendations from UNESCO to Uganda, and we ensure that they are part and parcel of the policies and laws and acts in the country. Yeah, the issue of the copyright laws and World Book Day is very significant to Uganda as a country and to us as UNATCOM. First of all, as UNATCOM, part of our work is pushing to ensure that this day is recognized and celebrated by the country. And since we are celebrating today, it is part of an achievement to us as the Commission, knowing that the recommendation that was passed by UNESCO is being recognized by the country. You also rightly put it that what have we been able to do to the copywriters or the book owners? UNESCO, through the National Commission for UNESCO, which is UNATCOM, that is us, has been able to play a number of catalytic roles by bringing together key partners and stakeholders, including policymakers, to ensure that we have a platform where policies that can put in place soft landing, smooth operations of these book writers is put in place. For example, the 2006 Act or the Copyright Act that was put in place by the country is part of what we exist to see, that these are put in place and it is being utilized and recognized and also acceptable by both the right holders and the policy bearers or the duty bearers. For example, UNATCOM has been able to train a number of duty bearers like the police, law enforcers on the importance of property rights. This took place sometime back in 2011, where a number of police officers were trained so that they are able to see that property rights have to be observed. These are properties that somebody worked for, where somebody has to benefit from. So that is part of what the National Commission for UNESCO has been able to do, so that at least the book writers in Uganda can feel and enjoy the value of their work. I know it is still a big challenge because the issue of piracy is there, the issue of online sharing of information, where somebody can just pick an information from somewhere, a book from somewhere, and share without the owner or the writer giving such a person right. So it is still a challenge, but moving forward, we are optimistic that there will be positivity in the long run. Thank you, Jamima. That is briefly what I can say for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chola. You've really touched on some very important factors, especially when you talked about training law enforcers on property rights. I think that is something that is very important in this community right now. If we don't have our law enforcers understanding what needs to be done and how to protect book owners and other copyright owners, then there's no point of having the law. There's no point of having the act that was passed in 2006. So thank you so much for those insights. Since you've touched on quite a number of roles that have been played by UNATCOM, I'd like to invite Mr. Katungisa also to give us his views. I understand that you previously worked with UNATCOM as well, and having listened to what Mr. Chola has said about the value that they're doing, or the activities that they're trying to take to ensure that they can encourage more authors and writers out there to feel more value towards their books and their copyright as a whole. In your opinion, what do you think you can do differently from what you were doing while you were at UNATCOM in benefiting the growth of the book industry in Uganda, and not generally just previously or what you were doing there, or any other ideas that may have come to your mind that you think we need to look at and maybe push forward so that the book industry in Uganda can be a little bit more impactful and attractive as well? I will personally say I was part of Femwrite, which was very famous for poems, and I enjoyed being there, but though I saw very little value. It was a very long time ago, but I saw very little value. So I would like to know, people like myself or other writers and authors out there, what is being done, what can be done differently so that we feel that, yes, we can benefit from the book industry. Mr. Katungisa, if you're there, please join us for this question.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator. Maybe a correction. I've never worked with UNATCOM, though at least we have been working hand in hand in partnership as far as the publishing industry is concerned. Regarding your question now, like I said in my introduction, that the National Bureau of Uganda, our mandate is to see that our documented heritage is made available to the general public. And of course, also, we are also empowered to see that the reading culture of Uganda is improved. And we know that the reading culture of our people cannot be improved unless they have what to read. And what to read, of course, is generated by the authors, by the publishing industry. And therefore, as a National Library of Uganda, as a library, our role is to see that at least what is published, what is written by the authors, at least is of quality, at least they benefit from it. We all know that many authors write for different reasons, mainly two. There are those that write for those that write for their personal, motivational. There are also those who write for economic gains because they want to benefit out of them. And therefore, as the National Library of Uganda, how do we come in to help these authors, to help the publishing industry? That's where the issue of ISBN, what we call the International Standard Book Number, comes in. We all know that we have different forms of heritage. We know we have the intangible heritage, the tangible heritage, first of all, where we have like the historical sites, we have objects. Then we also have the intangible, where we have like our culture, our norms, our music. And then we also have the natural, where we have like the natural features, lakes, rivers. Now, when it comes to, when I say documented heritage, then we mean any write-up that has been done on any other forms of heritage and has been put into document form. And now that we are talking about the World Book and Copyright today, then we are talking of a book. So if you are having a book that has been written about a certain culture, then that's the one where we are mandated to correct. And now our role as the National Library of Uganda is to see that these write-ups, these publications, these books are in standard form. And that's, and you know that we have different types of publication. It can be a physical book, it can be an online book, it can even be like a music, it can be a journal. So all these are different forms of publications. Now for a book, where I'm going to talk about today, since we are talking about the World Book and Copyright today, then we are talking about the ISBN, the International Standard Book Number. Now this is a standard number, like the name suggests, that uniquely identifies work of a particular author or a particular publisher internationally, world over. And just like you have a NIN, National Identification Number, then when you publish a book, so that book should be, if you are to benefit out of it, then it must be in standard form. So without the ISBN, then you'll find that your publication is not standardized. And why do we need an ISBN? Like I've said, is to uniquely identify. So when every publication has got its unique identifier, the ISBN, then the world over, you are sure that the works of a particular author can be uniquely identified by that particular author. That is one on the part of the author. And then two, when it comes to tracking an author, if you want to track your publication, then this number plays a very great role, since it will only be as for only your publication and not any other. And then also for purposes of marketing and promotion, because usually when we are buying these materials, we always base on the ISBN. When libraries are making orders, they always use the ISBN because it's just one for a title. And like, because you know, if you have to use the name of the author or the name of the book, you know, names are shared by different people, just like even for the title. If you are having introduction to economics, even if you enter subject economics, then you are going to have a variety. But the moment you enter an ISBN, then you only have that single ISBN. And maybe for those who are listening to us, and now this ISBN has got 4 different parts. There is a part that identifies whether it is a book or any other form of item. There is one that identifies the author, the publisher. There is a code that identifies the country, and also another code that identifies the title. So this we feel is when this number, it plays a role, because once your work can be tracked, once your work is uniquely identified, then at least you are sure that you are going to gain out of it. And 2, the other role is that if we are to improve the publishing industry, that means the readership has to be improved. And there is no way readership can be improved if you don't have what to read. That means that if the publishers, if the authors don't write, then we shall not have the materials that we need to improve the reading culture. And of course, when we don't, that means that as libraries, then we must have in stock what the publishers are publishing, so that at least our general public can be able to read and even be able to buy for those who want to have their own copies. And in that regard, therefore, the other role that we play is for the legal depots. This legal depots mean that a publisher or a writer of any publication is required at least to deposit a copy of what they publish in its originality. If you are a personal author, then you deposit 3 copies. If you are government, we expect you to deposit 10 copies. And the reason why we want these deposits is that the moment we have them in our collection, then it means Ugandans will have what to read. And when they have what to read, then at least the publishers will be encouraged to publish more. 2, because we know that when we have these legal depots, then we are sure that at least we are able to keep for the present, even for tomorrow generation, and even for the future generation. And this, of course, will play a great role in as far as maybe furthering more research for those who are inspired, who want to be inspired to write, will be finding it easier because we shall have this publication in stock. So, and of course, thirdly, is to be able to bring to the general public what the authors, what the publishers are writing, because we are open spaces for the general public where they can come and be able to read. Back to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, sir. I think I've really enjoyed listening to both you and Mr. Chola's views when it comes to creating value for writers and authors in Uganda. It's very important to note that reading plays a very significant role in the everyday life for everyone, from children to adults who are all over the world. In many countries, you will find that, and especially in African countries, it is generally known that reading is only pushed and more important when you're at school. It should not just be a school activity, but it needs to become a part of our daily life. However, the reality of this, especially over the years, is that the reading culture in Uganda has deteriorated. Let's be frank with ourselves. Many people are now either watching a lot of television or playing outside or doing other things, activities that may be a little bit away from reading. So I want to just come back to you, Mr. Chola, and touch on how has UNATCOM come out to make a difference in the country's reading culture specifically, and then we can go into other discussions very quickly. Mr. Chola, if you could give us your views on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Jamina. As the National Commission for UNESCO, we have about 3 different approaches that we have been able to use to at least change the reading culture in the country. First of all, we have decided to be an exemplary institution. We have in place a documentation center, which is stocked with different literature that the members of the public can come, borrow, or sit and have reading of the different kind of books that they need. As far as the 5 program areas are concerned, we have books on all the 5 program areas that we deal in. That is the sciences, social and human science and natural science, education, culture, and communication and information. They're all in our library. Now, we have gone a step ahead together with the Ministry of Education and Sports, where we sit, to see how to digitize some of these documents that we have in place. We have a project which is ongoing, and within this year, not the financial year, the calendar year, hopefully we will be having some of the books, reports that we have in place digitized so that members can have access to them online. Not only that, as a National Commission for UNESCO, we have also intentionally decided to publish most of our reports. Most of our intervention, most of our activities, most of our projects that we implement, at the end of the day, we put them down in black and white, publish them. And as the previous speaker was saying, we always go to them and get these IBSN numbers so that we are able to have them as documents that have made that level that can be published and given the IBSN number. To the members of the community, UNESCO has in place community multimedia centers. These community multimedia centers comprises of a radio station, a library, and a telecenter, which is composed of computers that can have members of the public accessing so that they can do some e-learning at the various levels that they are. As the National Commission for UNESCO, we have been able to put in place 5 community multimedia centers, which has in place all these 3 components. We have one in Ngora, another one we have in Wakiso. There is one in Pigi, which is called Bwama Radio Station, Nakaseke, and Kachwenkano, which is in Kabale. And I'm happy to let the participants know that most of them have all the 3 components functioning. Especially, I can give an example of the radio station which we have in Nakaseke. The 3 components are all functional. They were able to partner with National Library of Uganda, who donated some books so that members of the community can have access to them. So this is promoting a reading culture at that level, that lower level of the community. So I think this is something that UNATCOM is proud of, that at least we have been able to, at least, even if it is a drop in an ocean, but make a contribution towards improvement of the reading culture in the country. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chola. You've touched on quite a number of key points about how your institution is being exemplary towards fostering a better reading culture in Uganda specifically. I'm also happy to hear that there's a lot of collaboration with the National Library of Uganda. So I bet you have a lot of discussions with Mr. Katungisa. But I would like to now come to the legal side of things and ask Mr. Kawesi to just share with him a little bit from the legal perspective. You have generally had the value that different institutions are trying to put in for valuing the work of authors and writers, as well as improving reading culture in Uganda, which I think is very important for economic development. But from the regulatory perspective, could you let us know how achievable is it for us to have better regulation for copyright enjoyment in Uganda, especially through the ongoing reforms in the Uganda Law Reform Commission? As you've heard from Mr. Chola and Mr. Katungisa, the fact of the matter is that it may be a drop in the ocean, but certain steps, at least some activities are taking place. But we still have to come back to the law to support us to actually push forward and make reading and copyright enjoyable in this country. So, Mr. Kawesi, if you could share your views on this and how the Uganda Law Reform Commission is supporting.
you very much, operator. I think I need to put it across from the beginning that the Uganda Law Reform Commission is not a regulator of copyright and is not one of the enforcers. However, our role may be termed as auxiliary in the way we really handle the legal reforms, which in the end provides Ugandans with a sound legal regime for enforcement. Now, that said, protection of copyright, especially for authors of literary works, is supposed to be looked at in the general perspective of copyright as property. The law in its current form, even before I go to the amendments, really gives some good protection to the authors. Both the international laws to which Uganda has acceded, for example, the Berne Convention of literary works and others, they provide for protection of literary works. Our law, for example, Section 4 of the Act is very clear. The author is entitled to protection. Now, the challenge is that the protection of the authors is supposed to be understood in context of what they do and what they want to achieve. And in Uganda's case, the most important thing we have identified through our processes of consultation and interaction, we have identified they have issues with the licensing, they have issues with their publisher author contracts, and then they have issues with their CMOs which represent them, and then issues of enforcement really by the regulator, which happens to be the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. However, now talking about the possibility of protection and better protection, if I may mention, in light of the proposals for reform, for authors, the reforms bring on board majorly 5 things. And the first one that is brought on board is the issue of emphasizing or strengthening protection in the online and the technological spaces. Now, the proposed amendments really intend to introduce stronger provisions on protecting authors of literary works, dealing with people who upload their works, who share their works, and exploit without permission using the internet, online spaces, and other technological means. Also, the proposals seek to give room for protection where a person has reported infringement ongoing. So the proposals intend to introduce liability for internet service providers, for example, where a takedown notice has been issued and then an internet service provider has ignored it. So they will be liable for the continued infringement after the takedown notice has been issued and served. Still on technology, the proposals intend to strengthen the powers of detection from the origination of the content being infringed on and the delivery. Who originates and where is it delivered? So I think after the amendment, it will be easier to identify technically where the work originated and where it was delivered. So issues of technological neutrality are going to be dealt with. Another important proposal that I think will improve the enforcement is the issue of, which is still very contentious, of course, a little, called the private copying levy. Now, as we are all aware, especially for literary works, Section 15 creates exceptions for fair use of content that is copyright protected. Now, the authors are saying that because of this exception, and in light of the developing world where we are almost unable to control the amount of work that is being shared and used for free, we need some bit of compensation, some payment, a minimal contribution from the free users to compensate for our lost earnings because of the expanded fair use. So the private copying levy is intended to be collected by government and then channeled to the CMOs and then down to the authors to try to compensate their lost economic earnings as a result of the expanded and the seemingly uncontrollable fair use of their literary works. And we think that will also really put them in a better place. Also, the proposed amendments also intend to introduce a stronger provisions on CMOs. CMOs, for the non-lawyers and those who may not be familiar with copyright, are collecting society. They are called collective management organizations. Now, those ones are created under, I think, Part 7, starting from around Section 57 of the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act. Now, the biggest challenge really for the consultations, the authors, the writers are saying, our organizations are not serving us right. They of course, talk about corruption, the lack of accountability, but they also have concerns about the fact that it is hard for you to, it's actually impossible to be registered for the same band of rights. So there's a bit of monopoly which they're not comfortable with. So they want the law to open up. Of course, some of those ideas are still up for discussion. They're also saying it is unfair that the law requires that each collective management organization should be a company under the Companies Act before it is registered as a collective management organization. So looking at those, they are saying there's a need to simplify registration of a CMO. There's also need to put more stringent liabilities for the boards and the executive members of CMOs to comply to strict accounting requirements, and also to make them personally liable in case of any losses, so that at the end of the day, whatever is collected, the members, the authors are able to receive it, the royalties reach them. Finally, thirdly, also the proposals intend to give to structurally strengthen the administration of copyright. Currently, the mandate to administer copyright is vested in the registrar copyright with assistant registrars, but all that is clothed within the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. When you look at Section 41, I think about 50, you find that the registrar has functions of registering, inspecting, registering licenses, transfers, assignments, and so on. So you find that the registrar's office is one office that directly touches the life of an author. However, the stakeholders are saying that this office being clothed and hidden under the URSB is not, it's not serving them right. So they are saying we need a specific body for intellectual property, separate from the URSB. However, of course, I think we all know the position of government towards creation of new entities. That may not be easily achieved, but it's something that the stakeholders really have wanted, hoping that it can improve their administration. However, they said in the alternative, if they are unable to receive a specialized entity, let there be a strengthened copyright office in the URSB with a registrar of copyright and many other registrars who are directly accountable to the board, not to the registrar general. And in their view, they are saying connecting the registrar's office to the registrar general would still subject them to the backlog and the overload that is suffered by the URSB. So I think if the proposals come through and the administration is strengthened, the authors will be able to get better returns. Number four, I think the proposals also seek to strengthen and empower the registrar more as far as handling copyright is concerned. Now, there are many disputes which arise in the day-to-day exploitation of copyright, and some of those may not really require the already overwhelmed court system. So the proposals seek to empower the registrar, entertain some of those disputes, and also ensure that some orders are made. For example, take down notices are issued, cessation orders are issued, and also when it comes to licenses and contracts, to ensure that he or she can review the contracts prior to registration. Because as we have seen, the author-publisher contracts all and licenses are required to be in writing, and they're required to be registered with the registrar of copyright. So when this registrar is now empowered, he will be able to review and subject these contracts to a certain yardstick of reasonableness. That said, we are not trying to downplay the doctrine of freedom of contract. However, we think that much as there is freedom of contract, some of the contracts are entered into are unconscionable and therefore can be categorized as penalties. So by empowering the registrar to review them and set some parameters of reasonableness, it will empower the authors better. Also, the proposed amendments intend to introduce to strengthen enforcement. Now, enforcement really here we would look at the jurisdiction who entertains the disputes and what are the reparations given to the injured party. When you look at the law, I think section the Act under section 45 and the following sections, the law gives civil remedies and the mandate really is given to the commercial court. Now, the stakeholders have informed us that the commercial court is unreachable. It is hard for a person, for example, from Gulu, from Chisoro to come and litigate in Kabale. And then others were arguing that it is also unfair to restrict the jurisdiction to only the High Court commercial division, which is really in Kampala. So the proposals are going to open up the jurisdiction of the court from commercial court per se to the High Court. So meaning that a person who has suffered infringement from Gulu can go to the High Court of Gulu, Sorry can go to the High Court of Kabale. So that really there is accessibility of justice, and also in terms of content, the level of ability to handle the disputes, it was generally rejected that jurisdiction should not be extended to the lower courts because of the technical nature of this subject. So the High Court will be handling, but it shall be now open, not only the commercial court, but High Court in all its locations, wherever it is. In terms of penalties, most of the proposals will really be, we shall revisit the currency points which are given against the infringers. I have seen in the law, currently the maximum compensation for infringement is 2 million. That's 100 currency points, or imprisonment for 4 years. You can be sure that in the proposed amendments that will have to change to become a little more deterrent. And also, where there is no particular remedy prescribed, there is a general penalty, which is 50 currency points, that's 1 million, and imprisonment for up to 1 year. So you can also be sure that is going to be revised so that the authors can be given at least a protective, deterrent way of compensation in case of any infringement. So I don't know, Madam Moderator, if there's anything I've not touched. It can be raised in due course, but if I'm to briefly respond to your question, those are some of the new proposals that are going to come on board to buttress and improve really the protection of authors of literary works in light of the ongoing proposals. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kawesi. I think that was a very extensive and detailed breakdown of the types of reforms that ULRF is looking at right now, especially from the copyright perspective. I want to talk to Dr. Kakoza as well. Mr. Kawesi has really raised quite a number of challenges that have, a number of reforms that we can expect for the copyright regulation as it is right now. He has talked about the licensing issues that many authors are facing. He has talked about issues regarding accountability from their CMOs, which I think is a very big issue that needs to be catered for. He has touched on the registration processes, having different ways of restructuring and strengthening, I think, the Uganda Registration Services Bureau and how they are handling the registration process of copyrights, and specifically in respect to protecting the interest of authors and writers. There are quite a number. I'm sure the listeners were hearing everything he was saying, as well as you, but from a very specific perspective, legal, but also speaking directly to our listeners right now who are authors and writers. I'm very sure that you have been exposed to a number of challenges that authors and publishers in Uganda have faced in this particular industry, coming from how and what Mr. Kawesi has touched on, as well as what Mr. Chola and Mr. Katungisa have talked about regarding reading culture, value attached to books and authors. How best, in your opinion, do you think that authors and publishers out there can protect their interests and mutually benefit from their published works? Dr. Kakoza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamina. That's a very interesting question. And I think picking up from what Mr. Emmanuel Kawesi had just been elaborating on with the reforms, he started out by pointing out Section 4 of the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act, which talks about authors having an entitlement to the protection. So the biggest thing here is understanding who an author is, because there's a difference between an owner of copyright and an author. And sometimes the two are the same, and many people don't understand that. So just to create a hypothetical situation, if one Kakoza writes a book called Copyright in Uganda and does not have the money to publish his book, and he goes to Fountain Publishers and enters in an agreement with them that they can finance the publication of his manuscript into a book, ideally, through that contract, Fountain Publishers would become the owners of the copyright, and Kakoza remains just the author. So because of that divergence of understanding who these two parties are, Kakoza has moral rights to his work. He will always be, even when he's gone and 50, 100, or even 150 years, when the book is picked up from a shelf and you blow away the dust, it will always be known as Kakoza's book on corporate. So the moral rights don't go away, and they're not really finance-based. But the second kind of rights are the economic rights. And the economic rights go to the one who has now financed, in most respects, the manuscript and turning it into a book. And this would be the publisher. Fontaine Publishers has entered into that contract and says, okay, we will finance this, we will give you a lump sum. They may agree and give him a lump sum and take away the economic rights, or they may agree to pay royalties over a period of time, which are cut through, and he enjoys these royalties every time, certain percentages every time they publish. But nonetheless, the general economic rights would belong to the publisher, and those also have a different duration. So the two parties may enjoy this mutual relationship for as long as can be. But sometimes when you have a copyright infringement, then you'd ask yourself, who is going to file a suit for the copyright infringement? Then it goes back to the contract. Who really owns this book? The one that published it, the one who authored it? The moral rights and the Kakoza person here is not necessarily the same person who would sue for copyright infringement, because he does not own the book. He already assigned out the book. So all these things are really catered for in our Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act. But one of the other challenges there is people understanding how you spell out this contract. So I've already pointed out one, people understanding the difference between moral rights and economic rights and how they work out between authors and owners. But the other challenge that you find is people understanding the extent of the kind of contract you enter into if you're an author with a publisher. So this can give you either what you have as exclusive rights, where you enter into, as an author, you enter into exclusive rights to the publisher, and they're exclusive in the sense that you're giving this publisher all the rights to do everything related with the manuscript. You publish it into hard copy, even online copy, other versions, whatever may be, and no other person gets his rights. Or they may be non-exclusive, that you're only giving a specific kind of license to this one publisher, but you retain the rights to allow other publishers to come in and maybe have online versions, whereas you've given the physical hard copy version to a different one. So people also need to understand these kinds of contracts and how they play out amongst the parties. Another thing is understanding what you can do with the rights that you have under copyright, whether you're an author or an owner of this copyright. So recently, Uganda Registration Services Bureau, and by recently, I'm meaning probably the past 5 years or so, came up with the opportunity for corporate owners or intellectual property owners, looking at it in a broader sense, being able to use their copyright or their other types of intellectual property as collateral for a loan. If you own your copyright in a book, you need to present the certificate, which is proof of ownership, and use that as collateral to borrow money from an institution. This is under the Security in Immovable Properties Act, which under Section 3 allows intellectual property to be used as collateral for loans. So we haven't yet seen this being practicalized so much. I mean, there have been attempts under trademark, but for copyright, not as much, because people are still testing the waters. So these are some of the challenges that we find in the system, that it all boils down to awareness. What is out there and how can I use it? As well as the confusions that come with that. Understanding what are my rights? Do I just have moral rights, or do I also have economic rights? And what can I sue on the basis of those rights that I have becomes a major situation or a challenge. So it gives you the opportunity, if you're deciding to sue, to either go with a civil approach, which the law allows you to utilize, or a criminal approach that you can go through the IP enforcement mechanism that Uganda Registration Services provide, URSB, Uganda Registration Services Bureau, provides to institute criminal matters against the person that's infringing. Mr. Kawesi has also alluded to this. But with all these rights that you have, you should also understand as a copyright owner that there are certain users out there that can use your work without being accused of infringing. These may be researchers or academicians or anyone who's using your work, but showing that they're not economically gaining out of using it. That is those who you think are tapping into your economic rights, but they're actually not doing this. This is the fair use that comes with using such works, falling under the general principle that we call limitations and exceptions. So just in a nutshell, that's my short answer to your question, Jamila.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I don't want to go away from you yet because you've really touched on some interesting points and differences between whether you're an author, you're an owner, what's the difference, copyright, registration and protection, and obviously the use of the simple, which I think is something that is new and people need to really get a little bit more educated about it. But we also talked about the realities that very many authors are facing right now in the industry. And I want to highlight more on the linkage between the benefits for writers and readers. Since you've given us that distinction between who an owner is and an author is, I would like you to also touch on the issue regarding readers versus writers. So majorly, it appears that the writers have more power and more benefits, both commercially and virtuously, as you explained. Whether it's 150 years, it's your name, it's still going to be Dr. Kakoza. But we, the readers out there, we are buying these books. I'll tell you personally, I started reading over 20 years ago, when you were still a young girl, reading the Sweet Valley Highs and the Judith McNaughts of those days. Now, in as far as copyright law is concerned, to what extent can a user, like myself, for example, commercially benefit from someone's publication, and not just from the dopamine high that you get from reading a really good book, but no pun intended, but really we want to know, what do we gain as well as readers, and from your perspective, especially from the legal perspective, how we're seeing the Copyright Act as it is today. Please share your views.
Okay, thank you. That's another interesting question, which again leads to quite a lot of conflict or friction within the practical side of things. So if someone has expended so much labor and effort in preparing a book, you've gone through the manuscript stage and you've written your book and you've had it published and it's gone out there, and then you find someone using your book in a university and you're saying, I don't think that you bought this book from my sources, so I'm actually going to sue you for copyright infringement. Or someone just gets excerpts of your book and uses those excerpts in a teaching environment, and then you say again that this person is infringing in my economic rights space. So this is where the fingers are pointed at the user, and that's where your question is drawn from. And we've had some two interesting cases that bring out these scenarios very well. And for both cases, the direction of the court has always been in favor of the users, that the social interest should always override the individual specific interests of the intellectual property owner or the corporate owner. So the first case, which is a 2016 case, is the Google Books versus Authors Guild. Or is it Authors Guild versus Google Books? It kept changing as it went all the way to the Supreme Court. It's a case in the US where different scholars were not too amused by the fact that Google had scanned wholesale their books and laid them out on the internet, and people were able to get excerpts of these books and were using them. And they sued, claiming copyright infringement. They said, these are users who are using our work, but we're not benefiting. And the second case was in India just a year later, in 2016, where the University of Delhi was also being accused that it has all these photocopy centers where people were photocopying excerpts of certain books and were using them in their classrooms and university settings. So again, the university press and all the various university organizations got together, press publishers, that is, got together and sued the University of Delhi, saying that they were infringing on their copyright. So these are two interesting cases where the users are being said to be infringing. But what do the courts decide? The courts in India as well as the US came out and said that this is basically fair use. that they're just using the works for educational purposes. And this takes us back to what, under the World Intellectual Property Organization at the bigger scale, is known as the three-step test. So the three-step test started with the Berne Convention, which is the oldest international instrument on copyrights, 1886 legislation. And that same principle of the three-step test has been replicated in the TRIPS agreement. And these are international treaties that Uganda is signatory to. What they really mean in breaking down those three steps is that one step is that you're looking at special cases, and special cases can be anything, falling within the brackets of the examples I've given from India as well as the US. The second case is that you're looking at normal exploitation, that you're not conflicting with normal exploitation of the work. The third step is that you're looking at someone who's again not conflicting with legitimate interests of the copyright holder. So if the copyright holder has come up with a book and it's meant for a certain market and he's making money out of this market, you fall in a particularly different kind of market where you're not seen to be infringing on his market. As a user, you should be allowed to continue using his work. So that three-step test leads to the equivalent of what we now have as the fair use position, which we do have in our section 15 of the Ugandan Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act, that users or readers like you and me should be allowed to be able to access copyrightable works without being accused of infringing these works, in as long as we fall within those three steps that I've outlined. We are basically not hurting the actual market of the owner of the work. I hope that really answers the question in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think the fair use concept is something that is a little bit very complicated right now. And I think case law is going to help us really understand it more. But touching on that, I would like to come to Mr. Katungisa. You are a librarian and you play quite an important role when it comes to fostering a reading culture. And based on what Dr. Kakoza has talked about regarding fair use, you appear to be at a crossroads between preserving knowledge and also providing access to that knowledge. And at the same time, you also have to look at protecting the rights of the authors of these books. Now, how would you, in such a scenario, balance that both in your professional capacity, especially in relation to fostering a reading culture? As you remember, our theme today is looking about, how we can, the significance and the importance of books and authors in economic development. Now, if you have scenarios where authors are always raising issues because someone is using their book in a school or for whatever use, if the fair use concept cannot be properly provided for, in your opinion, how do we create that balance? If you could share your thoughts on that, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Just like you have rightly put it, we really find a big challenge just on how to balance fair use vis-a-vis protecting the rights of the authors or of the publishers. However, because just like Mr. Kakoza has rightly put it, that yes, we are there to ensure that we provide access to the works of the authors. However, we also bear in mind that the rights of the authors are not violated. For instance, we all know that we are in a .com era, and everyone would want to be able to access these publications of authors via online, wherever they are. Yes, and this is still a big challenge because, for example, giving an example of the National Bank of Uganda, yes, we receive legal deposits, the works of these authors. We see that the general public accesses them, and however much would have wanted to avail them in various formats, but the law restricts us in a way of seeing that at least the rights of the authors are protected. because if we are to digitize, for example, an item, a book that has been legally deposited with us, and then we made it accessible in digital format, then that would mean, in a way, from the part of the author, you would now lose out from his economic gains, because now that means that possibly the sales that author has been making in a way are going to be reduced, because majority of the people are going to be accessing online. So this is still a very big challenge, but we still believe that as government, possibly this is where we come in, and now we need to sit on the table and be able to agree. So that at least if we are to digitize, at least through the system, we can also be able to monitor how someone's work has been used, so that at the end of the day, possibly there is some paying back to the part of the author. Two, photocopying. Photocopying is also a very big challenge, because like they are saying, fair use means, for example, if I'm photocopying, I shouldn't be seen to photocopy the whole book. Though it at times becomes very difficult, how do you monitor that? Because someone can photocopy a page too, and at the end of the day, you find he has a whole book photocopy. But still, we always try to monitor through our systems, because within ourselves we have photocopying services, but at least we don't encourage. We try to sensitize and try to bring to the notice of the users the dangers in trying to violate the rights. Because if you photocopy the whole thing at the end of the day, then you find that at least the author would now not benefit, because possibly the copy that he would have sold through his sources, now you'll have it. And that's where now the new reforms within the law, I think this is where it is very important, where some provisions are saying maybe as an institutions, maybe there should be some levy, because you know that at the end of the day, photocopying is being done in the institution. And therefore, if that is the case, then possibly the law should have provisions where as an institution, if I'm an institution and I'm having my clients photocopying, at least at the end of the day, I should be having something that I should be remitting, which can be later on transmitted to the author, so that at least he doesn't get this zero photocopying. And of course, the other way, like I said, how the rights of the authors are protected is through that standardization. Of course, we also having an ISBN does not mean that your property is protected. This is just one way of seeing that at least you reach that level. Because when we give you an ISBN, then that alone identifies your publication. We will know that there are people who can con and assign wrong numbers, but at least this one here is internationally recognized and assigned by the system. So that by the time you go now to register your copyright with Uganda Registration Services Bureau, at least you have the other component. Because having, if you go and, for example, register your copyright, or just simply putting that symbol in your book, it doesn't mean that you are being protected. You have to register your copyright with Uganda Registration Services Bureau. And now when your publication, before it is published, it can be uniquely identified because it has that ISBN, then no other person will be able to at least try to now use or steal the copyright. So that is as far as we try to protect the rights of the author, to say that this will facilitate the registration of their copyright through standardizing their work by giving the ISBN, and then of course to trying to control. Yes, like at the moment, we are also trying to come up with a digital library. And of course, that is aimed at seeing that at least the general public can easily access what we have in our collection, which are the works of the authors. But of course, we have to be mindful that unless we have come to an agreement, terms with the author or the publisher, then all we can, apart from those that are copyright free, for example, government publication, because that is public information, But for this other one, for individual authors from the private sector, at least to start with, the best we can have is to have like an abstract, a catalog, just a brief bibliographical description about your item, and then the rest, if you have to digitize and change 100% the content into digital form, then we have to first see that at least we have come to terms with the owner of the item. Back to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much. So I have listened to what you're saying, and when you talked about creating a digital library, I believe that is probably something that has been in the minds of quite a number of regulators, both at the National Library of Uganda and even UNATCOM, I believe. And I got a little bit reminded that, in fact, in most countries around the world, major countries like the United States, Germany, Switzerland, UK, and quite a number of others, they actually have public libraries in almost every single city. Now, I would like to come to Mr. Chola from your perspective, listening to what Dr. Kakoza has talked about regarding the challenges that writers, authors are facing, and then also coming down to what Mr. Katong is talking about, preservation of knowledge, the issue of fair use, yet at the same time opening up room and space for people to have access to information in order to foster a reading culture. In your opinion, is it something that we can replicate as a country, to have public library in at least every single district? Do you think we can benefit from it as a country? Would it be practical? Is it doable? Just share your thoughts on this specifically, because like I mentioned, having a good, deep reading culture is not only going to support with economic development as a whole, but even as Dr. Kakoza talked about the issues we are facing regarding protection, if this could be streamlined through sensitization and having a library everywhere, or at least as many places as possible, is this something we can implement? Is it doable? Can we replicate it? Can we benefit from it? Mr. Chola, if you could please share your views on this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for the questions you have pushed forward to me. Let me also appreciate the previous panelists for their insights on the different questions that you shared with them. I've also been able to learn a lot from the different perspectives, most especially the legal part of the book and copyright laws, as far as they were mentioning. Let me also bring to the attention of the participants that this is possible. We can replicate whatever is happening in other countries here in Uganda. For your information today, the Director General of UNESCO is in Ghana to open up the World Book Capital in Accra. So if it can happen to Ghana, why not Uganda? And also, maybe just as a reminder, I think previously we used to have these public libraries. I remember growing up in Lira, we had a public library in Lira where we would go borrow books. But I think along the way, maybe because people were not interested, we had people not going there to read books. I'm not very sure if it is still there, but I think we need to revive this. We could start with the cities that we have put in place now before we go to the district, so that if the cities can kickstart and it is successful, then the rest of the districts can borrow. Because we have these spaces in districts now, we have the district information officers, at least who are trained people in either ICT or library. We have records officer in place, recruited and paid, that can be utilized to ensure that this facility is running and the community can have access to these books unless there are no spaces. But all I know, every district has an administrative units where they can just create space. They can even use council halls so that they are open to the public whenever there are no council meetings, and they can use it as a reading environment. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chola. I am excited to hear that these are actually things that we can implement and have libraries in every district. Reading, I personally believe that reading is something that takes us to the next level. When you start at a much younger age, your vocabulary is going to be on point. You're going to be able to speak and pronounce words a little bit better. You're also going to be able to articulate and understand different aspects of life. So everyone has a specific genre that they will be excited by. Obviously, the younger kids are going to go for the exciting books that are talking about silly stories about playing and running around the world. And as you get older, you're going to go into much deeper stories that talk about changes in life, how to be a better adult, how to be a mother, how to be a husband, how to be a wife. All kinds of information is out there, and this is accessible to us through books and book reading. Now, in a space where we are trying to improve our reading culture, I find that the legal position of copyrights is a very, very touchy point. And I believe that the viewers need to be very interested in grasping a little bit more about the legal developments that we are currently facing right now. So I would like to ask Dr. Kakoza if you could come in and just enlighten us as we get ready to open up to the public to also ask their questions. If you could just enlighten us and tell us if there have been any legal developments, for example, on the limitations and exceptions under copyright law, and specifically, how does this hamper the effective remuneration of book authors and owners? And I'm very much interested in stressing on this particular point, because much as books are very beneficial to schools on the fair use part, helping others have a little bit more of knowledge, the people who are actually sitting down to write these books, the people who are actually thinking of these different ideas, how to put them down to paper, or even if it's digital, need to understand where their economic benefit comes from, and what are the laws that we currently have that have developed that may stop them from actually benefiting, from their works. So Doctor, if you could come in, and then we can perhaps open the public. Dr. Kakoza, are you there? Hello? I do. Dr. Kakoza?
Sorry, it's kind of gone off. I'm
Okay.
back.
No. All right,
Okay.
great. Were you able to catch my question, or you would like me to?
No, I got the question very well. Thank you. Yes, current developments, very interesting. So in 2013, the World Intellectual Property Organization came up with the Marrakesh Treaty. The Marrakesh Treaty, which was, of course, by the word Marrakesh, was signed in Morocco, a place called Marrakesh in Morocco, looks at visually impaired persons, persons who are blind or visually impaired, and giving them access to print or readable materials, so basically books. And the focus here was that, look, we always think about ourselves, what we can read and how we can access all this kind of material, but we've forgotten a special group of people, and that is people who are visually impaired or blind. And we need to enable them to enjoy as much access to books as the rest of the world is doing. So this was in 2013, and many countries have signed the treaty and ratified it. We're proud to say Uganda is one of those 13, it's one of the few countries that has so far ratified the treaty. And when it comes to domesticating it, so many of the principles in Marrakesh are already within our Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act. But nonetheless, as we're now working on reforming the copyright legislation, we're also, as Law Reform Commission, through, as Mr. Kawesi was saying, we're trying to see how we can strengthen the current legislation, the copyright legislation in Uganda, to incorporate all the principles of Marrakesh, even though many of them are already there. But what it pertains to is that you're giving visually impaired persons free or to a certain limited access, very little money for them to pay owners of corporate source to access material, or on a more like a humanitarian basis that these are visually impaired, so we shouldn't be squeezing them or subjecting them to the same rigorities of commercial use that you would give to any other user of works. So that is a new development, and the way it has come out is that this has been considered as WIPO's most successful treaty ever, in terms of how fast it was signed and how fast many countries are now ratifying it and domesticating it. It shows that there is an interest in enabling visually impaired persons to be able to access readership material, either freely or paying much less than they would to the owners of such material. So on one side, you'd think, okay, book authors and publishers may feel the brunt of this, but on another, it still goes back to what I said earlier, that you're looking at this as a bit of a limitations and exceptions, allowing a category of people and therefore not really pinching into the actual remuneration that authors and owners of books have been getting out of their works. So that's the current development that we're looking at keenly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kakoza. I have quite a number of questions that I would like to ask, but as time is running out, I really want to give our audience an opportunity as well to ask the questions that are burning them right now. So please, I'm seeing all the questions coming through. Please don't worry. We're going to try our best to get all your questions asked. So what I am going to do is open up to the public right now. We have a Q&A, and some people had already started to send their questions out. So if that's okay with the panelists, I would like to read out the questions and maybe pick one or two of you who can answer what has been raised, and help the listeners also get a little bit more insight to what's troubling them in the book and copyright industry. So let me just start off very quickly. There's a question from Mr. Johnson Maganja, and he's asking, do we have any figures from the Uganda Revenue Authority showing how much the book publishing industry contributes to the GDP every financial year? I think this is a very interesting question. I don't know, perhaps Mr. Katungisa or Mr. Chola could take this question. You may have a little bit more information on that. Or perhaps even Mr. Kawesi, you could be able to touch more information on this. Hello. I know this one is a little bit of a tough question, but perhaps, Doctor, you would like to take it on. It's okay to say we don't know as well.
Yeah. I mean, I just put on my video to say personally, I don't have those figures. I don't know. I haven't had anything from URA as to the statistics of how much comes in. But I would have thought that Mr. Charles Batambuze, he's normally a figures man, a statistics man, would come in and tell us if he's aware. Since he heads Euro, he'll probably know. So Charles, if you're still on, maybe you can be the one to help us and give us those figures. If not, then we would probably just move on.
Mr. Batambuze, if you're there and you have an idea, we would be happy to hear from you. But maybe to touch on that, very recently, just to give an understanding about how book sales is very important around the world. There was a recent study that identified China and Uganda ranked as number 1 and number 2, respectively. And they have worldwide book sales in the book industry controlling 24.7% and 19.4% of all the global book sales. Now, this may not answer the question that was raised regarding GDP and Uganda Revenue Authority, but at least it gives the audience a little bit of an understanding regarding how important books publishing and book sales is to an economy. So let me move on to the next question, because I don't think that is something that we'll be able to answer. But thank you for asking it, because now that gives us a little bit more to go and research on. We actually think that's a very, very important statistics that we need to know about. So on the next question from Mr. Mugabe John Bosco, I hope he's still on. The question is ISBN free? And what is the test of the standard that you kept referring to while saying ISBN can only be given to works considered standard? I believe this question is directed to Mr. Katungisa. So if he could take it up and answer this question, then we can move on to the next one. Sir, if you could come on board and just explain to us what ISBN is it free, and how do you apply the standard?
Thank you so much for that question about ISBN standard. Maybe a bit more information about that standard is that the international standard book number, or international standard numbers for that matter, to cater for these other types of publication, is a system generated number that is assigned by the international standard body. Now, for the case of ISBN for the book, this body is based in Britain, and then the world over, in every country, there is a national international standard agency that is given the rights in that database, and then is able to assign that number on behalf of the international standard number. That's what makes that number standard. But maybe for the person who asks, maybe I think he was saying, when do you assign, when do you know that this publication is measures to be assigned a standard number? We do believe that in the publishing industry, it is not a one man's prayer, because there are many players that involved. Now, this number is assigned to your publication when your publication has reached publication level, the level of being published at the general public. And we know that when, for every writer, be it an author, is that when you are writing a publication, it goes through a number of stages. You begin with your manuscript, which is given to some other hands, maybe the auditors, the editors, to be able to test the content, the grammar, and so on, and just goes like that, reviewers, up to the level, by the time it comes to publishing, to being published, at least we are sure that it is at a standard level. And that's where now we come in, because as a National Library of Uganda, at this level, we don't have, we are not yet to that level of having a system of saying, let's first critique your subject. However, what we always try to be mindful is whether this publication is actually fit for public use. Because as you know, there may be some publications which may not be fit for our public to be using in some instances. So in that case, yes, it may be your publication, but may not be able to give it to assign you that ISBN. But what makes it standard is that it will have gone through the various levels through which a publication goes through before it is published, and then it's at that level when we give the ISBN. And like I've said, this is not a number issued by National Library of Uganda as Uganda, but by the international body that is responsible for standardizing publications. And there are several, it can be a book, it can be even a music, it can be a serial publication. So all these have different systems of assigning. I hope that answers the question. And possibly maybe the other question, maybe before I go off, was about the question which you are talking about, whether it is possible to have these public libraries in every district as it is in the developed country. I think they have already, our legal framework provides for this. because if you remember, before the National Library of Uganda was established in 2003, there used to be the Public Libraries Board, whose responsibility was to ensure that establishment and management of these libraries for the public, which we call public libraries, are done across the country. And by the time the National Library of Uganda was established in 2003, there were actually 14. The Lilas, the Mbales, the Kampala, the Mbarara that you are talking about. And these libraries still exist. And as we talk now, we have about 40 public libraries. And then we also have more than 150 community libraries. Now, the difference is that by that time, the national body, the Public Libraries Board, was the one responsible for the establishment and management. But when the National Library Act of 2003 was developed, now the Public Libraries Board was repealed, and now the responsibility of establishing and managing these libraries was now left the respective local governments, be it city, be it district, be it a sub-county, be it what. So the only challenge is that our local governments, the different local governments have not been able to prioritize the issue of establishing this library, but at least the arrangement, the legal framework is there, and ideally every local government is supposed to be having this library for the general public. Thank you.
Mr. Katungosu, before you go off, I think I would still need you. I have just seen another question that has been raised that is directed to you, and then we can ask the others. Someone has asked, has the National Library of Uganda thought of a system whereby if one simply Googles the ISBN number of a book in Uganda, then the book title and name of the authors or publisher will show up? Maybe if you could take up that question, then we can move on to the next.
Okay, thank you so much. The answer is yes. Like I've said, that the international database, once we assign that the ISBN, of course, it is not only the ISBN. There are quite a number of bibliographic details about that publication that we capture. The ISBN is just simply an identifier of your publication. Which publication is identified by you, the author. So we have the author's name, then we have the title, then we have the subject where that book is about. So now in the international database, at the moment we assign that one there, the moment you enter there, your item will be reflected. However, the only limitation now is that when we assign these ISBNs, we always try to compile, and then the international database is updated at the end of the year. However, we have also realized that shortcoming. So we are in advanced stages of coming up with our digital library. And one of the modules of that digital library is Legal Depot's ISBN and then the reference library. So now the ISBN and the Legal Depot's modules are almost being completed. And with that one there, we shall not be waiting for the international database to update, but we shall also be having this one here online. So my answer is yes.
All right, thank you so much. We have just a few more questions. I would like to open this up to either Dr. or Mr. Kawesi. There are actually two questions, in my opinion, could be answered by the same person. I'll start with this one. Someone has raised a question saying, I understand that this is a book copyright discussion, but could the panelists touch on digital works like music and other forms of artistry? Do the analogies cut across? Now, before you answer that question, let me ask the next one, which could easily be answered together. How are the law authorities protecting writers against piracy, especially the online piracy and the use of software like e-scanners to steal writers' work? So since it's still within the digital space, perhaps either Dr. or Mr. Kawesi could take up these two questions and give us some insights.
Okay, just a summary of the whole thing is that it's all copyrights. Under the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act, Section 5 talks about the different types of works that would fall in within what we consider copyright. And they include computer programs, they include literary works, which are the books that we're talking about, they include dramatic works and all those other things. So software material is copyrightable as a computer program, and books. So all these, lumped together are protectable. And if someone is infringing, whether doing a copy of the kind of work, going to a photocopier machine, or you're illegally downloading what you consider copyright piracy, you are still infringing. And the current law caters for that, but it does have its weaknesses. And as Mr. Kawesi has alluded to in his own presentation, there's an ongoing copyright law reform, which is spearheaded by the Uganda Law Reform Commission. And one of the things it's addressing is touching on technological protection measures, what we call TPMs. And this is trying to see if the law can also utilize technical ways of protecting works. That if someone creates copyright music that he wants to utilize online through streaming services, for instance, you can use technological protection measures to ensure that people do not illegally download your music. And even then, if you still have this IT guru who comes in and has ways of circumventing such technological protection measures, the law still touches on that. At least the reform process is looking into establishing a legal provision that looks at illegal circumvention of works and illegally downloading, and with repercussions to come out of that as well. So I hope that kind of addresses the question.
Doctor, I think it really does touch. As explained, it's all copyright. So whether it is a book or it is music, it literally falls within the same ambit of the law. There is one last question that I think is quite interesting. I never thought of it this way, but let me raise it again. It's Mr. Mugabe John Bosco. He has said, you said you're trying to regulate photocopying. How are you doing this? And to what extent do you allow photocopying? He also goes and asks, do you have a threshold like 10 pages max or 5% of the book as maximum for photocopying? I think this is a very interesting question, and I think perhaps I would like Mr. Kawesi to really come in and talk about its regulation, especially from the reform side of things and what the law looks like now and what they expect it to look like. But I think maybe the other panelists can also supplement on what Mr. Kawesi touches to, and then we can get to closing our session.
Thank you very much. I think the position of the law is very clear. They are allowable parameters of use. And as Professor Dr. Kwele said, Section 15 allows all exceptions that can be termed as fair use. And there are many, many categories of that. I really wouldn't want to go through them. But Section 15 lays down many exceptions, reporting of public events, citing quotations, with acknowledgement in writing, copying for academic and teaching purposes, and so on. So now, and he also alluded to the yardstick, which is also laid in Section 15, that is followed to see whether the use intended of the work is fair or unfair. You really look at the character of the work being copied, the amount of content being taken, the purpose for which it is going to be used. You also look at whether it will substantially affect the economic rights of the author. Now, that said, in my view, and with the experience, remember when we were using the repository library at Makerere, we were not allowed to photocopy more than 2 chapters in a book. I don't know how they do it at the National Library of Uganda. However, properly so, there should be a limit on the number of pages you take out of someone's work at a particular point. But still, as Mr. Katungisa said, a person can take a piece by piece and eventually come up with a full book. So I think it's now an issue of enforcement. It comes back to enforcement. The enforcers and regulators should be on the ground to see how much of a piece has been taken and for what purpose. And that, of course, concerns all those items which are not protected under the general exception of fair use. However, the practice should really be subjected to enforcement and regulation. It's a question of fact and law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kawesi. I'm going to take just one last question. We have someone who has raised their hand, and if admin could just allow him to ask his question directly over the mic. I think it's a Mr. Kajubi Brian. If the admin could assist so that he can ask his question. Whichever panelist can take this, please do take it, and then this will be our last question, and then we can get ready to close the session.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Kindly confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear, we can hear you.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Brian Kajuri. I have my one is an inquiry, another one is probably a recommendation, take home for the Uganda Law Reform Commission. I will start with the reform. When you look at the copyright and neighboring rights regulations of 2010, first of all, let me thank the presenters, Professor Mr. Kawes, Mr. Donia, and our good moderator, Mr. Jemina. I don't know whether Mr. Kawes and your team, you've looked at this. There is a challenge in the regulations. Form 3 of 2010 regulations. Professor has talked about the distinction or the relationship between authorship and corporate ownership. Now, the regulations, Form 3 in the regulations, they don't cater for a corporate owner. Now, that poses a challenge. If I am listed, the person listed in Form 3, if you look at it, it only mentions an author. The shortcoming of that, I think, is that it limits any other person who may purchase probably the economic rights or the copyright in someone's work when that person is not the author. So I think that one should also be looked at, and if this is the opportunity to make changes in the law, they should just leave it both author stroke ownership, because I can be the owner when I'm not the author, and at that time I'm the one who is enforcing the copyright, the same way professors has talked about it. The other one is about the ghost of fair use in copyright infringement. You will agree with me that exploitation and infringement of copyright, depending on the band of rights, varies. The way you exploit and infringe musical works may not be the same with books. I'll give an example. Whenever someone uses someone's book, they will always hide behind that defense our professor has talked about with the 3-part test. Now, it is very hard to blanketly use that in music or in musical works. So I think people in the publishing industry, the book industry, they suffer a lot because anything a person tell you, we just took it to the university. People are just using it for research. People are just, we didn't use the substantial part of it. And I think either case law will, especially in Uganda's context, will aid more on that. But I find it that most people apply those Section 15 as if it's applicable to the musical work, because musical work, by the time you go, you claim fair use. In other words, the three-part test is clear. The book industry, they suffer a lot. Everything, fair use, fair use, fair use. Lastly, it's an unethical conduct. I think these authors in the book industry, they suffer a lot, even the publishers themselves. There is a need for Mr. Donia, I think this is your good industry, your area, to encourage, especially authors. There are some ethical considerations that must be emphasized. For example, you find an author has an agreement with a publishing company. They do for him the publishing work, because usually they get money, and that's why you never hear wars in the publishing industry, the same way you find them in the musical world, because you release your work, your rights are bought, and you keep quiet. What happens, which has happened, 3 cases, some of you need to get to these judgments. You find an author who has sold the economic rights to a publisher, the entire copyright. But it's the same person, when he goes outside there, not only does he market the book, but he does, how is it called, side deals, like you continue to sell your own book, whose economic rights you sold somewhere. The person is an author, is a don, teaching, and in the same process, he tells them, you go to this shop, not even a universal library. Now, I think there are also some ethical considerations. We may only waste time on the law, but some people lose money, especially the publishing houses, when the authors, they don't pay attention to these simple ethical considerations that affect the sales of the author. Other than that, I just wanted to share those few things with you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you so much, Councillor Brian. I don't know if Dr. or any of the panelists have a comment on what Mr. Kajubi has raised, and if not, then we can proceed to close. Doctor, Mr. Kawesi, or any of you, do you have something you'd like to touch on?
Well, thank you, Jamina. I don't know what the others have to say. I entirely agree with Brian. He's raised some very valid points about the inaccuracies in the corporate regulations that need to be addressed, as well as the unethical practice that we find out there. It's like the medical doctor, the hospital who will tell you to go to his pharmacy to buy drugs. It's the same thing that Brian is also addressing here about an author telling you to go to a specific publisher, and yet he has already given out all his rights in assignment and the rest. So yes, I leave it to the rest to also comment, but those are good points that Brian has addressed. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kajubi. I have noted with concern your issue of the incompleteness of Form 3 in the regulations, which appears to leave out the clarity between the author and the corporate owner. So we are going to study it more and probably advise the URSP to take it up when they're updating the regulations.
Okay, thank you so much. At least it is true, like Mr. Mugabe has said, and it is not only even to the part of the publisher that an author enters into an agreement with the publishing house and then continues again selling their own copies. It is even the other way around also, that even on the part of the author may enter into an agreement with the publisher, and then possibly the agreement is that maybe the author will be benefiting from the sales that are going to be made. And so it becomes a bit challenging for the author to be able to monitor how many copies have been sold. So that's why I think we also always encourage our authors at least to also try to involve the CMOs, collective management organizations, because there is a way how they monitor. At least we have seen at least some testimonies where they have been able even to go on the streets and be able to get pirated books. And so if such arrangements are entered into, at least it will be easier for either the publisher or the author at least to be able to keep track on their sales, so that at least they don't lose out on their economic benefits.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe that this has been a very enlightening session for everyone that has been able to join. For our listeners, I'm so grateful. We have had quite a big turn up. Actually, a little over 70 people were able to join us. As I mentioned, this was about identifying the significance of the book industry in economic development. Now, I would like to just say a very big thank you to our panelists. Everything that you've discussed and talked about today has been very helpful. I hope that our listeners have been able to take away from it. And if I can just leave you with one thing from one reader / aspiring author to another or others, is that we need to improve on our reading culture as a country. I'm happy to hear that steps are being made both from the legal side and even from the private sector to ensure that we're able to share our knowledge, have more readers and authors out there. So, and a very big special thanks also goes to the Uganda Reproduction Rights Organization, and specifically Director Charles Batambuze, who was able to speak to us earlier. As I'd mentioned, he was very instrumental in getting this session organized. And of course, to the Uganda Law Society and the team that are supported from the IP cluster and the administrative team, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Of course, as you can see, we've had a very good online session, no glitches or anything like that. Someone is behind the scenes making sure that all of this is working well. And to our viewers and listeners in your various capacities, once again, thank you so much. I want to wish you all a very good and lovely evening. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, and thank you.